as the Specter, with fiery eyes, came toward them. Reaching their wagon, put whip to the horse, and left the Specter in possession of the lonely woods. Welcome, Friday Night Ghost Frights. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. Explore with us. Tonight we're going to be exploring more historic ghost stories from Alton, Illinois, the kind that made the newspapers 100 years ago. I'm actually really doing this. I know we just did it a couple weeks ago, but there is this massive snowstorm out here that basically nixed my idea for tonight. So this is a little bit of a quicker and easier thing to do, but it still gives you all those fantastic ghost stories that you love. So let's dive right into it and check out these actual reported ghost stories that made the newspapers, that were headline news or were somewhere within the newspaper back in the day. Ghost at the Glassworks, Alton Evening Telegraph, 1908. The Glassworks has a ghost, according to one of the night watchmen, who reports having seen his ghost ship flitting around the yards from one house to another frequently of late. The ghost never enters any of the houses or furnace rooms, possibly because it is hot enough for him where he comes from, and he is desirous of a change. The report of the ghost presence has caused considerable nervousness, it is said, among the helpers at the works, and they stick close to their houses and their work. There is no more roaming around the yards at night by workmen, and perhaps that is what the ghost is there for. A sneering skeptic says it is, in all probability, Dr. Cornelia DeBay of Chicago, the woman physician who jumped the 10-foot fence in preference to entering the gate, in hope that she might find violations of the child labor law when she almost fell into the arms of the night superintendent George Finkel. She was so frightened and pale that she never recovered her natural color. The Alton Bluff Street Ghost, the Alton Evening Telegraph, September 2nd, 1904. William Redmond, the well-known East 2nd Street harness dealer, is dead game. He proved last night when, shortly after midnight, he and his wife were awakened from their sleep in their home on Bluff Street by noises made by someone evidently going down the stairs in a hurry. "Wake up, Will," said Mrs. Redmond. "There is someone in the house." "I know it," said Will. "I've waked up. You get up and see who it is." He told the wife to go see who it is? What the fuck? Both got up, and Mr. Redmond said to his wife, "Now you go downstairs first and carry the lamp. I will follow after you with a revolver, and if the burglar attempts to do anything to you, I will kill him." Mrs. Redmond followed instructions, and a thorough search of the house was made by both, but without discovering anybody. One of the doors was unlocked, and probably the intruder got out that way, unless it was the once notorious Bluff Street ghost that formerly irritated and agitated Bluff Street residents, in which, desiring to return, got into the wrong house. Whatever it was, it badly scared Mr. Redmond, and the scare was worse after nobody could be seen than before during the noise. A ghost from the Alton Daily Telegraph, May 31st, 1892. Last Friday evening, Messrs. Peter Rayland and Thomas Convery had quite an experience with a spirit from the other world. The gentleman left the residence of Mr. Raynold in a wagon about 5 o'clock to cut a few bean poles. They drove along slowly, being in no hurry, to a thickly wooded patch of scrub oak back of Upper Alton, to a place known as the John Smith Farm near the cutoff. Arriving there about sundown, with an axe both began to cut small shoots in trees such as could be used for their purpose. Each had cut several poles and were proceeding to another spot when Mr. Raynold beheld a ghost. Both men were spellbound and stood for several seconds as the Specter, with fiery eyes, came toward them. The weird scene in the lonely place was too much for the pole cutters, and they ran with might and main towards where their horse was tied. A barbed wire fence was scaled in one leap, and both men, much exhausted, reaching their wagon, put whip to the horse and left the Specter in possession of the lonely woods. Messrs. Raynold and Convery cannot describe in words what they saw, but they will never go to the spot again by night. The place where the ghost was seen is a lonely place. On both sides of the woods are deep ravines, thickly covered with underbrush. Probably the gentleman cut a small tree under which slumbered one of our ancestors, who, aroused from his rest, resented the intrusion. The little experience will be remembered. Mrs. John Kelly has premonition of nephew's death. Alton Evening Telegraph, September 25th, 1907. The superstitiously inclined and those who believe in signs, omens, etc. can point to the experiences of Mrs. John Kelly of East 3rd Street attending the calamity that befell relatives of her yesterday, as substantiating their belief somewhat. Mrs. Kelly is a sister of Mrs. Jack Thomas and was greatly attached to her nephew Will, who was killed outright yesterday afternoon at Armstrong's Quarry. Mrs. Kelly was uneasy and anxious all day yesterday and told several of her neighbors, it is said, that she knew something awful was about to happen to one belonging to her. She had no idea what form the calamity would take, nor who the victim would be, but she felt sure someone akin to her was about to suffer severely. Monday night, she was aroused from her sleep by a something, which she described as a feeling that there was someone in the room. She arose and examined not only the room, but the entire house occupied by her family, but found nobody. The experience was repeated several times Monday night, according to the story, and to add to the mysticism, every time she turned on the electric light in the kitchen during her investigation tours, it would suddenly go out or be turned off. It was following the above experience that she declared her belief to be an approaching calamity. Unexplained mystery at agent's home, disturbance in piano, Alton Evening Telegraph, January 25th, 1908. Fred Browning, agent for the United States Express Company, is still worrying over a happening at his home last Thursday night. He was sitting alone in his home, reading a copy of a St. Louis paper, when suddenly he was startled by a crash coming from the piano in the same room, as though 6 or 8 of the strings had broken at one time, and the sound of their snapping, together with the rattle and the twang of music that was given forth, almost made him fall out of his chair. He made a hurried investigation and could find no strings broken in the piano. Everyone was intact, and the piano has been given forth just as sweet music since as it did before Mr. Browning was given the sudden start. There was no one in the house with him, and no rats in the house to make the noise in the piano. Rats, nice. If any strings had been broken, the mystery would have been explained, but the piano is as good now as it was before. Some student of the occult may explain the mystery. Found a real spook. Burglar enters House of Mystery. Alton Evening Telegraph, March 14th, 1913. All the horrors of the evil eye of Edgar Allan Poe depicted them in his hair-raising story, when nothing as compared with the terrible night Mark Podner, 20 years of old, of Mount Olive, Illinois, spent in the big house of J.J. Besant at Lakeview last night. Podner had heard there were spooks in the big house at Lakeview, and last night he went there, cut a window pane out, and entered the home. With a bullseye light, he started out to investigate, and is believed to rob the home. The Lakeview home is a perfect maze of mirrors in every room, and when Podner shone his searchlight across the room, he saw the ghost of a man crouched down with coat collar up, hat slouched down on the head, and in all a terrible-looking man. Believing in spirits himself, terror seized the burglar and he fled up the stairs. There he saw the same figure staring at him wildly, and he ran from room to room, only to be faced by the figure, as he believed a ghost, who masked and tried to frighten him. After an hour of this terrible experience, he rushed down the stairs, and the bullseye showed the same figure rushing up the stairs to meet him. This was too much, and the young burglar fell in a heap at the bottom of the stairs and went to sleep. This morning, the keeper of the house, Henry Myers, who sleeps in a back part of the house, found Podner, waked him, arrested him, and placed him in an interurban car, took him to Edwardsville, where he turned him over to the authorities. A pair of slippers found on the young man caused a charge of larceny to be entered. Podner is mentally unbalanced as a result of his terrible night, and declares that the house is haunted, and shrinks back in horror when one talks to him of his terrible night. He is held to the grand jury, but his mental condition may be inquired into. And if you wanted a house back in 1910, all you had to do was go to William Feldswitch. William Feldswitch of Alton owns a couple of homes that are haunted. Free rent for a year. Alton Evening Telegraph, February 23rd, 1910. There's a man at O'Fallon, Missouri, a telephone operator there, who has been taking a lively interest in a supposed haunted house in Alton. Someone went over there and told the O'Fallon man, who seems to be unduly credulous, that William Feldswitch of Alton has a couple of houses here which are haunted. Story went that Mr. Feldswitch could get no one to live in the house, and that, despairing of breaking the hoodoo, he would give a year's rent to anyone who would live in it, and finally would give one of the houses to the person who would brave the spooks in the haunted house for 12 months. The O'Fallon man first wrote a letter and got no response. Then he called up on the telephone and wanted to know about it. Now he's planning a trip to Alton to make an investigation. He's deeply interested in Mr. Feldswitch's alleged haunts and is willing to fight it out with the spooks. That's going to do it for this episode of Friday Night Ghost Frights. Please let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. And if you have not yet, please subscribe and click that little bell icon for notifications. I'm Mike Ricksecker. Till next Friday night.